2020 has been a unique year. The 2020 scholarship will last for 2 years. They've obviously not been able to travel. They actually got 2 days into their overseas experience and then had to come home. So that would have been exceptionally disrupted. So like many of us, but probably to an extreme, they've had to manage unforeseen pressures in their family and business lives. They have had a Nuffield program though through this year, and we've asked them to share 1 to 2 insights each on their Nuffield journey to date. What they've been hearing is they've interviewed people from across the food and fibre sector. So ladies and gentlemen, if you could join me in welcoming to the podium Tracy Brown, Shannon Harnett, Ben McLauchlan, Ed Pinckney and Phil Weir. So Tracy, over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Hei mihi nui ki ngā ātua, hei mihi nui ki ngā tangata whenua, hei mihi nui kia koutou koutou mai nei e tēnei pō. Ko Tracy Brown tōku ingoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Tracy Brown and I'm delighted to be here on behalf of my fellow Nuffielders and would like to acknowledge ministers and other invited guests. If everything has changed, why would we keep everything the same? 73 years ago, William Norris, Lord Nuffield, an innovator, philanthropist and visionary, created the Nuffield Travelling Scholarship to recognise agriculture's contribution to feeding the British Empire during World War II. Post-COVID, in a world where food as an essential need has attracted global introspection, these scholarships are even more relevant and more crucial to our future success as a food-producing nation. For us, the 2020 scholars, COVID has replicated the degree of disruption, pressure and uncertainty that a Nuffield Travel Scholarship seeks to create, minus the travel, of course. Our plan A of 16 weeks international travel gathering global food system insights was reduced to just 24 hours at the Contemporary Scholars Conference on an island just off Brisbane. Our plan B to complete an Australia-New Zealand bubble tour with the Anzac scholars morphed into plan C, which was to be a road trip of New Zealand with just the Kiwi scholars. That too was cancelled when Auckland went into its second lockdown. Despite and because of all this, we have grown as leaders and we've learnt a few things. We've learnt to be nimble, to deal with uncertainty, to grow our resilience, and to work collaboratively as a team. But mostly, we've learnt to make the most of the opportunity that Nuffield is. After multiple plan changes, false starts, and deep reflection about what Nuffield actually was, we came to the realisation that Nuffield is a process to create insights and foresight. We also realised that we didn't actually need to travel to do that. Hence Plan D was born, and there'll probably be an E and an F, but we're up to Plan D at the moment. That transpired into being a series of telephone and Zoom conversations with leaders, mainly from the agri sector, across the country. Ki te kotahi te kākaho ka whāti, ki te kapuia e kuri e ka whāti. If a reed stands alone, it can be broken. If it is in a group, it cannot. We have taken the opportunity to collaboratively innovate, rethink and redesign how Nuffield could be delivered in a COVID and post-COVID world. The model of the past won't be the model of the future. We leveraged our networks and connected with partner organisations. To date, we've had over 200 conversations about the impact of COVID, made more than 20 key observations around topics such as innovation, people, supply chains, social issues and strategy, and we've come up with 4 deep insights. In a Nuffield New Zealand first, Nuffield scholars have worked together to deliver collective insights. One of the key learnings for all of us this year has been that your opportunity will come when you're not ready, and that you just need to jump off the cliff and learn to fly on the way down. So with that in mind, I would now like to invite Ben McLauchlan to the podium to share with you our first insight from 2020, the year of living precariously.
Thank you, Tracy. Imagine you've just arrived back in New Zealand from a long-awaited conference, cut short due to a global pandemic. You're then required to go into 2 weeks of self-isolation. During your self-isolation, it's announced that the rest of New Zealand needs to prepare to go into level 4 lockdown. It then dawns on you that the impending harvest of your grapes, your year's work, and annual payday may not happen. You mentally work through what this may mean for you, your business, your family, and your community. Then try to park it as the thoughts are too challenging. Fast forward 4 months, and it turns out that your worst fears have been avoided. The grapes have been harvested, made into wine, and are making their way around the world as Sauvignon Blanc, a wine that Marlborough in New Zealand is famous for. Without producers, industry bodies and the government collaborating and proven supply chain resilience, this remarkable achievement during a pandemic would not have happened. Our first insight is proven supply chain resilience. This evening, I'd like to discuss the importance of international trade in food and fibre to our economy, and how our supply chain responded to support this, and then pose some challenges, questions we must all answer to maximise the opportunities that our recent supply chain resilience has given New Zealand. As we know, New Zealand is an export-driven economy, with exports accounting for 30% of our GDP. With the World Trade Organisation in April 2020 forecasting the merchandise trade around the world reducing by up to 32%, the threat was very real to New Zealand. We were facing potential severe financial and social challenge. So with this background and the potentially catastrophic outlook for New Zealand, what happened? New Zealand was able to trade goods with our international partners despite the local and international challenges. While other countries have faltered, resulting in food being dumped and highly variable supply. Due to the desirability of our products with the global consumer, we've been able to outpace other export-focused economies. Thanks to exceptional global consumer demand for our food and fibre and our ability to deliver, our vital connection to the world has remained open, therefore ensuring the flow of key imports such as medical supplies and other building blocks of our society. We should be proud of how this has provided a vital lifeline to keep New Zealand economy intact and lessen the potential severe economic impact of COVID. While our resilient supply chain has enabled New Zealand to stay open for business in a complex and changing world, there are some key challenges we must consider in order to maximise our potential opportunities. How do we sell New Zealand's point of difference and enhance our trading relationships? What effect will geopolitical factors outside of our control have on our supply chains? How can we leverage our intellectual property and leadership in food and fibre industries to strengthen current and secure new trading relationships? We've done well. We've proven our supply chain resilience, but we need to keep a focus on our core purpose and maintain our integrity to maximise our opportunities. I'd like to now invite Phil Weir to the podium to share our second insight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Coronavirus infection rates, technological innovation, the disparity between the have and have-nots are all parts of our society which have experienced exponential growth. Through our Nuffield experience, our second key insight was the exponential growth in the disparity between the have and have-nots. This inequality has expressed itself as disparity in access to food, access to work, access to influence, and access to capital. To illustrate the insight, I want you to think of two Kiwi families, hypothetical but based on conversations this year. The first, Angus and Cherie, Waikato farmers with off-farm interests, and Fred and G, Auckland-based salaried workers. In speaking with Angus, the sense of COVID is one of, what COVID? We had a drought. Angus operated from an agricultural bubble within a bubble. Through lockdown, Angus battled the elements, but gained a COVID belly attending Zoom meetings for his relevant governance interests. Angus and Cherie enjoyed having the children back home from university and didn't miss their love-hate relationship with the Corrie Lounge. Financially, the year ahead is not flash. Land prices significantly reduced on the back of a global downturn in white tablecloth. This notwithstanding, the family's term deposits and strong equity position have been utilised to take advantage of historically low interest rates and to support their son in purchasing an additional property. Fred and G, on the other hand, had an all too different experience. On the 25th of March, despite 10 years of service, the retail business employing Fred closed as New Zealand went to level 4 lockdown. G, who had casual work based around their 4 young children, was also left out of work. As savings vanished and the reality of lockdown on a 400 square metre section took hold, Fred and G found themselves not only further away from home ownership, but paying significantly more for food as their green grocer closed and they were forced to shop at the supermarket paying more for their staples. Angus and us here in the audience as haves are not committing a sin. We play the cards in front of us. It is not our role to solve the capital constraints of the have-nots. Our role is to understand that increasing disparity is real, both between and within our communities, and to focus on the areas we can control or influence. It is vital we understand that these are tough times and that it is important to ensure that New Zealand benefits from us being world-leading food producers. Increasing the disparity will further erode our social licence with our urban majority. Food insecurity for the citizens of a food-producing nation would be as hypocritical as claiming clean and green and then on the cover of darkness discharging effluent directly to water. Our risk is one of being incorrectly tarnished with a label of landed gentry profiting significantly through New Zealand's high food prices. The reality, as we know, is that farming margins are often far from fat. Our challenge when thinking about this is to consider the alternative perspective and to recognise that perception does matter. A two-speed economy also matters. Our opportunity is to leverage off our need as food producers to bring the rest of New Zealand with us. So a social licence to operate solidifies, and we see non-farming Kiwis telling our stories genuinely and with an effect that telling our own story cannot. So to position New Zealand for international excellence. Thank you, and I would like to invite Edward Pinckney to the stage.
Thanks, Phil, and good evening all. 12 months ago, we were briefed on the pending Nuffield year. Expect the unexpected, they said. A one-liner that not just Nuffielders would come accustomed to, but most people in organisations. Fit for purpose leadership become a strong, reoccurring insight with themes attributed to it when delving into our many conversations. Leadership in organisations reacted in this time of crisis to expose examples of excelling fit for purpose leadership, and also those that were quite literally caught with their pants down. Clear and concise communication and reassurance by leadership for people to trust and to get buy-in is intrinsic to the successful outcome. The infamous 1pm update with Ashley Broomfield and Jacinda Ardern is a perfect example. It became part of our daily routine to listen, get guidance, and gave confidence in a time of crisis. Government reassurance to business with support by way of subsidies, wage scheme support, cash flows, and gave confidence at this time. Essential services operated under strict guidance to feed and nourish people and keep vital supply chains operable. MPI and industry ensured produce supply chains remained open in safe working environments and with little disruption in such a fragile environment. Several industry leaders hailed this as an overall success and congratulated MPI. With fascinating intrigue, we observe their global counterparts perform with varied success and with what could happen. Never let a good crisis go to waste, said Churchill. This remains as relevant today as much as ever. World War II is a case in point, starting with a humble Tiger Moth and finishing with jet-powered fighters. Transport, logistics, by sea, land and air were all major advancements, along with plastic surgery and medicine. The list goes on. It only makes us wonder what advancements we will see when we look back on what we have lived through. It became evident how organisations responded, new priorities established, resources reallocated, and how willing financial institutions were to support. Human capital responded proportionally to their leadership, supporting the organisations with buy-in, personal sacrifices, dealing with pay cuts and redundancies. The ability for leadership to be light on their feet, change strategy, innovate, and see opportunities were all key markers that determine fit-for-purpose leadership. Challenging many established leadership structures and highlighting conservatism and leadership with a fear of failure. Organisational change and advancement were evident with many pipeline projects, fast forward and adoption of new technologies utilised. Developing online selling platforms, IT programming and databases have all advanced. Also evident is the use of technology to support leadership. The mighty Zoom app has become a necessary evil in a very short time. It challenges, how do we keep up this pace? How do we grow leaders who have skills to create, innovate, communicate and embody values? Leaders who thrive on uncertainty, complexity and can handle rapid change. I will now hand over to Shannon Harnett. Expect the unexpected.
Thank you, Ed. The rise of the conscious consumer is a growing trend, and COVID-19 has certainly accelerated this trend. We have the opportunity and necessity to reimagine what our world looks like post-COVID. Our fourth insight, volume to value to values. To clarify what we mean by volume to values, volume is produce more, sell more. Value, selling at a higher price. Values, production that aligns with our beliefs for a better world. I will discuss three main points. 1, the rise of the conscious consumer. 2, farmer values. And 3, our challenge to meet, no, exceed expectation to produce based on values. We define a conscious consumer as someone who has the growing awareness of the provenance of food that they buy and eat. This includes giving a higher priority to environmental impact, social impact, animal welfare and sustainability when making food choices. This consumer isn't just looking for the monetary value when making a purchase. They are looking for products that align with their values. This growing trend, exacerbated by lockdown, is economically possible due to the global rise of the middle class, spurred along by greater connectivity and growing unease of unethical and unsustainable farming practices. A business owner in Tauranga said to me, "Lockdown gave me time and space to evaluate my ideals around how I live. This was an opportunity that I'd not had in 30 years. Farmers are the stewards of the land. New Zealand farmers care passionately about the environment, sustainability, people and animal welfare. The COVID crisis has afforded us to use the platform to discuss our place in the world, now, tomorrow and into the future. from on-farm to consumer. The values-based consumer, who is prepared to pay more, is a catalyst for our farmers to economically afford to move from volume and value to values-based farming, and with it, increase the prosperity of all of New Zealand. Our food and fibre sector is the best in the world. Let's make it the best for the world. Imagine for a moment, we are post-COVID. New Zealand farmers have responded and delivered on the growing demand for value-based products. We are all doing the right thing, even when no one is looking. We farm and consume with integrity. Our whole country rises as we rise. Our challenge is this: what are the values we should aspire to, both as individuals and collectively as the food and fibre sector? And how do we go about understanding our consumers' values? How do we portray to consumers that by buying our products, they are already contributing to low emissions, low footprint food production? How do we build on our foundation and capture the hearts and minds of our consumers? How do we educate ourselves to move from economically driven to values-based food production and consumption, ensuring a better world for us all? I now invite Tracy back up to the podium to wrap up and give the call to arms.
Thanks to my fellow scholars for sharing our 4 deep insights. So just to recap on those, number 1, proven supply chain resilience. Number 2, growing disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Number 3, challenges around fit-for-purpose leadership. And number 4, adding value by moving from value to values. The 2020 and the 2021 scholars, who have just been announced tonight, and congratulations by the way, will all be travelling both domestically and hopefully internationally next year, fingers crossed. These insights become the foundational knowledge to help us solve some of the challenges and the changes before us as the industry. We look forward to connecting with many of you and talking with you further to understand the opportunities before us. Whilst no one person, and certainly not the 2020 scholars, have all the answers, a leader from the education sector said to me during one of the interviews, COVID has created a purposeful environment for change. How relevant that is. It's created an environment where we can and we must question the status quo. It's created an environment in which, if we evolve quickly, we can outpace those that refuse to imagine. It has shaken the world and tested us all. Across the globe, people have taken stock of core values: where food comes from, how it's produced, and supply chain integrity have become even more critical. New Zealand food producers have always been innovative, but if we are to continue to succeed, our kōrero as food producers, processors and value adders needs to be further substantiated. So, let's nurture key relationships with trading partners based on values, mutual respect, quality products and reliable supply. Let's foster leadership, excellence and relationships so that others tell our story for us. Let's consolidate ourselves as a supplier of choice for local and international consumers. Let's do the right thing by acting with integrity and fairness so that New Zealand's world-leading food systems deliver a prosperous New Zealand. Let's make change one small action at a time. This is our call to arms to you.